All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. My name is Syed, and I'm joined by my colleague Sherbie today. Today,
Hello.
we're going to be talking a little bit about baseball. Now, what exactly you ask? It's all about offense and how we can bat at 300. To learn how to bat at 300, we'll be using data analytics, which will be designed to further explore how statistical analysis and multiple linear regression models can help us understand what really drives success in the MLB. By analyzing four different eras of baseball history, we'll identify which offensive and defensive schemes have been the strongest predictor of team wins and see how these relationships have evolved as the game has changed over time. Now, to start things off, let's quickly look over our table of contents and understand what exactly we'll be looking at today. To start things off, we'll go over a quick overview of our major eras that have shaped the sport of baseball today and dive a little bit deeper into some of his insights. We'll go then into the analysis of various linear regression models and important notes to take away from each. Following that, we're going to be doing some forecasting using said models and identify some outliers, which we can obviously call errors, to justify the authenticity of our findings, which would obviously finish off with our conclusion. Now, to begin things off by understanding various MLB eras. First things first, we have the dead ball era from 1900 to 1920. The dead ball era was known for low scoring games and a strong emphasis on pitching and defense. Pitchers dominated the game, and preventing runs was way more important than generating offensive power. As a result, team success was driven heavily by efficient run production and strong defensive performance rather than home run hitting. Here's a quick graphic indicating lowest single ERAs in baseball history, with 8 out of the top 10 numbers being in the 1900 to 1920 mark, with the lowest one being just right around the 0.86 to 1 mark, as the first one came way before that, even in 1880. Moving on, we have the live ball era from 1920 to 1940. This marked a major turning point in baseball history. Following the year 1920, cleaner and livelier baseballs, along with rule changes, led to a more dramatic increase in offensive production. Various players in this era, like Babe Ruth, transferred the game by making home run a central part of the offensive strategy. Teams began scoring more runs, and power hitting became increasingly important. Although offense grew significantly during this time period, teams still required solid pitching and defense to consistently win games. Next, we're going to have the 1960 to 1990 timeframe, which is baseball's expansion and evolution era. Between that timeframe, the MLB experienced rapid expansion as new franchises were introduced, increasing the league's competitiveness. Most importantly to us, we have the Toronto Blue Jays. This era also saw significant changes, including the lowering of the pitching mound following 1968 and the introduction of the designated hitter role in 1973. As a result, teams in the league became more balanced, relied on a combination of offense, pitching, defense, and advanced strategy rather than depending on one particular stat. Overall team performance became the strongest predictor of success. Last but not least, we have the steroid era from 1990 to 2010. The steroid era was defined by a dramatic increase in home runs and offensive production. Many players posted record breaking numbers, making this one of the highest scoring periods in baseball history. However, the era was later overshadowed by widespread use of performance enhancing drugs, which truly raised a lot of questions about the legitimacy of many records. Despite the emphasis on power hitting, successful teams still depended on scoring more runs than their opponents while maintaining strong pitching and defense, making overall team balance the key to winning many, many games throughout the season. Now, here's just a quick overview of the batting average from 1965 to 2014, which was posted by the MLB themselves. Here we get a good indication of the jump in the total batting average following 1990, where we saw a major spike up until 2010, which was obviously the beginning of the drug usage era. As mentioned, an era that many people till this day question about the legitimacy of how we can evaluate players within that time frame. Moving on, we're going to do a quick overview of linear regression models. Now, in order to understand that, we need to understand the two variables that we need to use. To determine the best predictors of team wins, we want to use various regression models to understand that case. The first model that we're going to be using is runs scored versus runs against, because variables capture a team's overall offensive and defensive performance. Now, since baseball games are ultimately won by scoring more runs than your opponent, we expected these variables to be strong predictors across every era, regardless of what happened during those time zones. Our second model uses home runs and earned run average, better known as ERA. Now, we selected these variables because they represent two of the most recognizable statistics in baseball. Home run measures the offensive power of your team, while the ERA measures your pitching effectiveness. We want to see whether these more specialized statistics could predict wins as well as the broader team performance metric. By comparing the two models across the different eras, we were able to determine whether overall run prediction and prevention or individual offensive power and pitching had a greater impact on team success. Now, in order to understand how we're going to approach this method, let's have a quick look at the code that we're essentially going to be running in this matter. So first and foremost, like always, we're going to be importing our pandas from our library using the data sheet that we have on hand to understand all bit of data for every time frame. We're going to put in the time periods that we want to focus on. So we're obviously going to start with 1900 to 1920, put in the years in between, and finish off with the steroid era from 1990 to 2010. Put in the range that we want to use in this particular time frame, and then following that, we're going to be start to configuring our overall graphic that we want to see input this sort of data. So the first one that I've mentioned, we're going to be comparing runs scored versus runs against. So the data that we have captured here is the runs scored versus runs against title, with the y-axis essentially following the games one metric of understanding whether the predicted model can get a good outcome of whether the predicted wins can match the actual wins during that time frame. And we're going to be doing the same cursor pause for the further part of the y-axis, using the minimum function to get the minimum value that we can get from this time, and also the maximum value. Repeating those same steps, we're going to do that with the second model that we wanted to do, which was home runs against the area average. Following the same process, we're going to go through with understanding what our min and maximum data is, and giving us a good understanding and making comparison of the two using our set values on the x and y axis. Now, in order to dive deeper into this particular metrics, I'm going to hand it over to Sherbie, who will give you guys a much more in-depth analysis.
Thank you so much, Syed. Right now, I will be giving analysis of the dead ball era. During the dead ball era, well, Models 1, runs scored and runs against, clearly outperformed Models 2, home runs, and ERA. The points are tightly clustered around the 45-degree reference line, indicating that the models predicts team wins with high accuracy. In contrast to Models 2 shows much greater scatter, suggesting that home runs were not as strong predictors of success during the period. This aligns with the historical nature of the dead ball era, where teams rely on pitching, defense, batting, and stolen bases rather than power hitting. Overall, runs scored and runs against provide a much better explanation of team performance than home runs and ERA. Next, I'll be getting into the live ball era. During the live ball era, Models 1 again demonstrates the strongest predictive performance with prediction closely following the ideal 45-degree line. Models 2 improves compared to the dead ball era because home run became much more common following the introduction of the livelier baseball and the rise of power hitting such as Babe Ruth. However, runs scored and runs against remain the stronger predictors of games. One, because they capture a team's overall offensive and defensive performance rather than relying primarily on home runs. Next, I'll be talking about the baseball expansion and evolution. Between the 1960 and 1990, Models 1 contains to outperform Models 2. The strong cluttering around the reference line indicates that overall runs production and run prevention remain the best indicator of team success during a period of league expansion and strategic evolution. Although home runs became increasingly important and the designated hitter was introduced in the American League, teams still relied on balanced offensive production and effective pitching. As a result, runs scored and runs against consistently produced more accurate prediction than home runs and ERA alone. Last but not least, we have the steroid era. During the steroid era, Models 2 performs better than in previous eras because home run totally increased dramatically across Major League Baseball. Despite this improvement, Model 1 still provides the most accurate prediction, with observation remaining much closer to the 45-degree reference line. This suggests that while home runs became a defining feature of the era, overall offensive production and the ability to prevent runs were still the strongest determinants of team success. Even in one of baseball's most power driven periods, a balanced model using runs scored and runs against offers superior predictive accuracy. Next, I'll be passing it on to Saeed.
Thank you very much, Sherbie. So now what we're going to do is use the linear regression models and make a bit of a forecast with it. So now looking back at the question from Spring 2, we're going to be using the fourth regression model from 1990 to 2010 and forecast the number of games won for the New York Yankees and the Toronto Blue Jays using values for the independent variables for 2012 and 2015. I'm going to be further discussing the errors in my prediction by comparing the actual wins to the predicted wins for those teams in those years and give some comments about the model error by using the RMSE method to give my set of comments on those predictions. First and foremost, this chart here compares the actual number of wins versus the number of wins predicted by our 1990 and 2010 regression model for both the Yankees and the Jays in the 2012 and 2015 seasons. Overall, the predicted values are very close to the actual values for three of the four observations, as you can see here, indicating that the model actually performs relatively well. The largest difference occurs for the 2015 Blue Jays here, where the model actually predicts that we're going to win 103 wins that particular season, while in effect the team actually won 93 games, which is off around by 10 games. Now, this suggests that the model captures overall trends effectively to a good extent, but cannot account for every factor, including team success in various other ways, injuries, roster changes, or the performance of certain players in close games. Moving on, this chart here displays the absolute prediction error for each team and the season. The smaller bar would indicate a much more accurate prediction in this case. The 2012 Toronto Blue Jays had the smallest prediction error at only about zero point 0.3 wins, making it the model's most accurate prediction. The 2012 New York Yankees and the 2015 Yankees also had a relatively small error of 2.2 and 1.4, respectively. However, in contrast, the 2015 Jays produced the largest error at 9.84 wins, showing that this season was actually the biggest outlier in our total analysis. Overall, concluding that three of the four predictions were within approximately 2 wins of the actual results that we have on hand. Now, the overall accuracy of the model that we want to look at based on the two graphics that we had is used by the root mean square error method, or better known as the RMSE, which in our case is 5.10 wins. Now, the RMSE, as mentioned, represents the average prediction error while placing a significantly greater emphasis on larger mistakes. Since the MLB as a league consists of 162 games in a season, which is many, an average error of about 5 wins indicates that the regression model provides reasonably accurate forecasts, which is a lot higher than we expected it to come. The RMIC is largely influenced by the larger prediction error for the 2015 Blue Jays, while the other three forecasts for the other SPIED were considerably more accurate. Finally, I'm going to pass it back to Sherbie, who's going to provide you with the conclusion to our insights.
Thank you so much, Saeed. Now, what I found interesting is that even though baseball changed dramatically over the 100 years, from small ball strategies to the home runs era, the same basic idea stayed true. Teams that scored more runs than they allowed consistently won more games. While home runs became more important during the live ball and steroid eras, they were never the strongest predictors of success on their own. By comparing the two models across different eras, we find that runs scored and runs against consistently provide more accurate prediction than home runs and ERA. This is because they capture a team's overall offensive and defensive performance rather than focusing on just one aspect of the game. To me, this shows that even when trends and playing style change, the fundamentals of winning remains the same. A balanced team that can both score runs and prevent runs is still the best predictor of long-term success. Thank you guys so much for listening to our presentation. We hope you enjoyed it and find it educational.